Hello, my name is Osha. I like talking about American presidents. However, today I'm going to switch gears for a moment. Well, sort of in response to uh, an action by the incumbent US president, number 45 and 47, and that's with respect to the visa bans, temporary travel visa bans, and also the bans on uh, F1 students, well, which includes Nigeria, which of course is my country of origin. Um, so I'm going to be talking more about, I'm going to title this, benefits of university, and this is sort of a part two. So, yeah, Nigerians have been temporarily banned from obtaining visas, F1 immigrant visas, to the United States, and of course, this is painful considering that Nigerians are known to love education. That's now widely known in America because Nigerians are amongst the most educated people in America, period, right? And even back home, we were known to really love education, and we had a very educated population. Um, so without a doubt, just because I hold about 5 degrees at least, right, and I have more just courses. So if they were to pile up, I have three undergraduate degrees, right? So if you were to convert my two other undergraduate degrees into master's levels, right, that would be about about five master's degrees, right? So it would be more. So I did undergraduate degrees in three different majors, right? And in addition to that, I have an MBA and I have a Doctor of Law degree and other certifications. I've been fortunate, I came originally to America for education. So that's a reason why, I really want to speak to this topic. I want to talk about this topic because there's still many Nigerians like myself. I came, 27 years ago now. I'm an American citizen now, um, and the conditions that were available uh, for me back then are being impeded for others today. And that's because, the majority culture, there's a concern about the demographic change, right? The alteration in the demographic, um, the demographic constitution of the nation, or ethnographic changes, right? Changes in ethnic composition. And because America had a pathway in which it's still the most immigrant friendly. Maybe not now because of its anti-immigration policies at the moment, the ICE raids and the ending of visas, the visa bans, um, and that's in reaction, again, that's in reaction to the altering demographic composition, because America has a thing that when um, immigrants come in, whether they originally come in as students and then they transition into becoming foreign workers, and then they become green card holders, and then they become American citizens. Once you're an American citizen, you are not a second class citizen, right? You're an equal citizen to the natural born citizen. That's protected in the 14th Amendment, right? That, I've done videos discussing the 14th Amendment. So both the American born, natural American born, who goes back centuries, and, the new citizen, right? The naturalized American, um, they're equal citizens, right? They have equal protection of the laws, they have due process of the laws, so they're equal in terms of rights. Um, However, there are people who are now becoming very nativists in America. So you're hearing people calling themselves heritage Americans, even though they're not Native Americans, because the only people who have sort of been indigenous to the lands, going back eons, were Native Americans, and most of whom, were decimated, right? They constitute a trickle of the population, right? Um, But now you have white Americans who, well, they trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower at best, right? I should do a video discussing what the Mayflower was. I will do a video discussing the Mayflower because there are a lot of myths associated with the Mayflower. And they call themselves heritage, Americans. They're new American citizens of African descent, like myself, right? I'm an American. I'm a Nigerian. I identify as a Nigerian American, right? I'm an American citizen. But of course, I'm not a descendant of African American slaves. So even African Americans distinguish themselves, and they call themselves FBA, Foundational Black Americans. Sometimes ADOS, so there's this conflict now, and it's like nativist, right? So there's always been that element of nativism in America, which is a paradox because America historically has been the most immigrant friendly nation, right? But there's always that pushback, especially when there's a sense of a loss of power, or for political reasons. We've had periods. There was infamous Asian Exclusion Act. I've done a video passed by Chester A. Arthur. There were the you know anti-Asian immigration laws passed by President Woodrow Wilson. Those passed by President Calvin Coolidge. So until Lyndon Johnson passed the Immigration and Nationality Act during his presidency, and we have the um, current regime of immigration policies, which became very liberal and brought in so many different people. Um, and now there's a blowback, right? And again, Nigerians have been sort of banned from obtaining F1 visas, and regardless, another administration might come in and alter what this administration is doing, because immigrants remain very vital to the nation. When we consider Google that we check, a co-founder of Google, was foreign born, right? Is a Sergey Brin, and he's not in isolation. In fact, 44 to 50%, right, of founders, Silicon Valley founders. Silicon Valley, of course, that's California. That's where all the tech giants come out from, right? Tech innovation. 44 to 50% of Silicon Valley founders are foreign born, immigrants, right? Um, Even unicorns, right? Startups. That's a unicorn is, a startup that has about $1 billion, over $1 billion in investment, right? 55% of unicorns are by immigrants, started by immigrants, right? And immigrants only constitute about 13% of the US population, but they're responsible for over half of startups. Fortune 500 companies, which I had been reading of since Nigeria, everybody knew those are the largest companies in terms of capitalization and market control and dominance. Fortune 500 companies, half of them, 50% of them, were started by immigrants or their children. Half of them, 50%. So immigrants are very responsible, for the growth and the prosperity of America. But there's that pushback. When you look at the politics, what's going on, of course, everybody knows Ilhan Omar, the controversial, well, to Republicans or to her detractors, she's controversial. But to many Africans, people of African descent, they look on her and her efforts with admiration. That's Ilhan Omar, right, who was born in Somalia. There's Joe Negus. Joe Negus was born in America, but his parents were from Eritrea, right? Joe Negus is a lawyer. He's brilliant. He's another congressman. In New York, right, the most consequential city in America, New York City, America's largest city, right? Most significant city. That's where Wall Street is on, right? America's financial capital, New York City. The current mayor, the incumbent mayor, is an Indian American who is African born, right? Zoran Mandani was actually born. Zoran, well, sorry, he was actually born in Africa, right? And so that rattles a lot of people. It rankles a lot of people. There are people who don't like, they're concerned. There's always been, been this anti-immigrant hysteria, that element of America that's always been, been xenophobic, despite our diversity. Yes, we're moving forward, but it's all again, the race relations in America is pendular. It's back and forth. And even Nigerians, and Nigerians who are, like Nigerians are not left out. We just don't gather degrees and don't do anything with it. We are actually also involved in that tech, in the startups. I mentioned how Calendly, there's a very famous uh, scheduling application that's used by virtually every company in America. It's called Calendly. It was started by a Nigerian immigrant, right? He came here at 15. His name's Tokwe Awutona, and he wasn't born here. Calendly. He's a billionaire on Forbes now, right? He's rated as a billionaire. Calendly, right? Before him, I remember when I was still in school at Columbia University, I had a classmate. There was this famous app everybody was using, hopstop.com. And I'm somebody who I search everything. I research everything. I see information, I'm going to look it up. And so I found out that hopstop.com was actually started by a classmate of mine in King's College, Lagos, Nigeria, Chinedu Ichiro. I think he became popular for having sold that app, um, like a MapQuest thing for New York City, hopstop.com, New York City. He supposedly sold it to Apple for $1 billion. So you see, Nigerians are not, um, they're not missing in that entrepreneurial, um, in ventures, going on in America that immigrants are known to be responsible for. Um, in fact, a son of our former president, I wasn't going to mention his name, but I realized that he's actually he's got a public profile now, so I can say it. Dario Basanjo went to King's College. I think it was with me as well, but I think he was my junior, right? Dario Basanjo, he had worked for Microsoft, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if he has as many as 18 patents to his name, right? 18 patents. He has many patents anyway. But he worked for Microsoft, and he's now vocal. So that's why I can mention his name. So son of a former president, right, Obasanjo. So there are many immigrants doing well here, Nigerian immigrants. So we do well here, and it's unfortunate that President Trump is now banning Nigerians, with the F1 visa bans, right? So there's so many Nigerians across the board doing very well. Like I said, they come here and they excel. But the thing is, something I want to mention is I wish, especially considering the hysteria, anti-immigrant hysteria, because I was in this country when 911 happened. But I was very fortunate that I was in an environment and there was a president who didn't just gather F1 students. Because the people who were responsible for uh, the outrageous, uh, the assault on the twin towers were F1 students, right? And but the president then, as President George W. Bush, he didn't round up F1 students because they looked for those people who were a threat, right? And people who were involved, people who were a threat. And I remember my co-workers back then, he was like, "Hey, Osha, you have nothing to worry about because everybody knows you. You don't cause any trouble. You go to your classes and you go to work." So it was a small town, and that was when I first realized that wow, that this is a small town. They actually really know everything, right? I was working, busting my behind, working, and going to school full time, and it was like, look, everybody knows you. You know what you do. You go to work. You go to class, right? And so I mean, I'm always grateful for that. And imagine, I never imagined because I I didn't come as an economic migrant. It is only until recently that I realized I did because I didn't know back then when I was in Nigeria that there were actually families, right, whose parents, they were households, they trained their children from, they were training their children not for them to live in Nigeria and to work and to do things in Nigeria. They were training them to become economic migrants, to send them abroad to go and work, to work in the West, whether in England or America, permanently go to school and stay there and become Americans. My household didn't do that. My parents didn't do that, right? My parents, for us going to study abroad, it was just like a luxury item that, my father was getting us, right? For me, you know, right? So when I wanted to go and obtain my master's, it was just like a luxury item that my dad was purchasing. That's why, the school I went to, you know, uh, I didn't pick a school that was very expensive or anything like that in the South, right? Just to say, hey, I studied, I've had that American experience, and then I returned home. But there were other things. Americans had their own plans. So, and I'm an American citizen, and I've gotten all that education on my own. Apart from that, apart from what my parents gave me. So, but there were those households who they raise their kids and they start to train them so they can go abroad. And Nigeria continues to do that. And I understand because of the terrible economic conditions, the military rule created in Nigeria, uh, an oil producing nation with tremendous resources and talent, right? And the proof of that talent is the success rate of Nigerians in America, whether it's the same thing in the UK, right? Everybody knows of is it Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, right? Although she was born in the UK, but she was one of those. She spent 16 years in Nigeria. She went to school and then she went to the UK. And Nigerians think she's a sellout, but the thing is, you can see her resourcefulness, right? Her resourcefulness, and she wasn't a stellar student apparently in Nigeria, but when she went to the UK, your conditions, uh, sometimes dictate who you are and what you do with your talents. And by the time she went to the UK, she was very resourceful. She did computer science, computer engineering, and then got a law degree again. You see, that shows she's got several sides of her brain active working, and she's done very well since then. She's a public figure now, right? Leader of the British Conservative Party. The reason I'm doing this video is, yes, I've had a lot of value in international education. The first part I did, I talked about how being exposed to people from different cultures, right? It makes you broad-minded, right? And it gives you an ability to think better. You're a better critical thinker, and you makes you flexible and versatile, which is very good. You know how to adapt, right, to different people, different situations, which just staying in your comfort zone at home um, will not allow you, right? But the thing is, you can only achieve that if you can afford it, right? You can't use everything and or what you don't have to acquire international experience if you don't have the resources or if your pathway is blocked. And that's what's happening now in Nigeria. And I'm hoping that Nigerians will use the youth, everybody will focus on keeping Nigerians in Nigeria. It would be good if Nigerians even had a policy to prevent people from going out to get an education, right? International education, so that the government and families would invest money in on Nigerian education. America, there was a time I did a video explaining the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education, right? Brown versus Board of Education was affecting public schools, right? Because the government couldn't rule regarding private institutions because private institutions, a private business can do whatever they want to do. So when the government ruled that segregation of schools was unconstitutional and they had to integrate schools and stop the parallel economies. What happened was many whites in the South started to create what's called segregation academies, private schools, right, for whites only children, right? Only whites. They didn't want blacks to come in because they didn't want to integrate schools. So these parents in Nigeria that are wealthy or middle class, upper middle class, using all their resources to send their children to America, to the West, to get to become economic migrants, they can pool their resources together and create private schools that have quality. They can seek funding and create private schools. Nigerians are said to spend, diaspora Nigerians are said to spend about $40 billion a year home. Instead of, recipients using the money for luxuries and whatnot, because that's what typically happens, right? They use that money to show off, right? They can use the resources to fund private schools that will be quality. The international experience that was so important for me when I came to America in the 90s, that was because we didn't have a robust internet. At least I didn't have access. I don't know if the internet was big back then, but I didn't have access to significant access to the internet in Lagos at that time, right? The internet really took off, in the 2000s, or also called the noughties, right? The 2000s, right? And since then, you can be anywhere and learn. I can be in America and learn about what's going on in China and Russia, and so long as they don't, put significant filters, right, to impede my access, right? And you can learn about what's going on in the world. I can learn. I don't need somebody living in Lagos, Nigeria, for me to do a Google Maps and see what's going on in Nigeria, what's going on in Lagos. I do it regularly, right? Google Maps. I can just look, search an area, and I can see what's going on, right? I can see what's going on in Nigeria. I can see. I have access to all the information, the new news, right? When I was in law school, I was being published in different newspapers in Nigeria. I've appeared on TV stations, right? Nigerian TV stations while in America, and I haven't had to leave America, right? So the internet has changed a lot of things, and the Nigerian government, Nigerian families can invest on their access to the internet, the World Wide Web, the access to information technology. Of course, they have to invest significantly in the power sector, right, to make it possible. So Nigerians now need to be focusing on developing their nations, just like see Korea, see South Korea. They're wealthy. Singapore, these other nations, right? America has been pulling its talent from South South, the elite of the South South nations, right? The elite of the developing nations, the ones who've been coming here to America, right, as economic migrants. But it is changing the demographic makeup of America, right? And again, the majority culture doesn't want that. You will always have that element of racism in America. It was started at the beginning. There was the element of racism at the founding of America. It's still there today, 250 years after, right? You can't do anything about it. So don't risk the lives of your children, right? Because what ICE is doing now is very dangerous. There was a case of some Haitian women who were deported by ICE, right? They were deported from Puerto Rico, wherever in Latin America that they were deported to. They found them, they had been decapitated. Their heads had been severed. And the government is just deporting people randomly. There was a female, was it in El Salvador? She was in school. She had a valid student visa. And she was just deported, arrested, handcuffed, and deported. The thing I feared the most in my life was going to jail, was going to prison, being handcuffed. I'm an American citizen. I'm lucky I was never handcuffed, never sent to jail, while all the time I was a student, all the time I was not an American citizen. I was just sent, I was handcuffed while in my own home. So, that's another story because I get to sue when all of this, the fake charges they've placed against me is over. I get to sue the state of Maryland for a substantial amount. So if you're an attorney, hey, um, I get to sue them for a substantial amount. I'm an American citizen. And the day I was sued and assaulted in my home and I was robbed and They violated me as well, violating 18 USC section 1801. I was kidnapped under color of law, violation of 18 USC section 1201, violation of 18 USC section 3771. All sorts of violations, violation of 18 USC section 242, right? All sorts of violations. But the thing is, I'm an American citizen, and now I'm a lawyer, right? I'm a lawyer. I understand the law. If this happens to your children, if they're just picked up, and it's happening, there are many people they're picking up. There are many people that are being killed in ICE custody. We don't hear because corporate media is corrupt. Many people are dying in ICE custody. You don't want your children to be arrested, locked up, and then they're killed and nobody knows. And then they frame, they lie, they give disinformation, they lie about what they were doing. They say they're terrorists or they did something, and it's a complete lie, right? Because me, I was in my home, I was a victim of a swatting. When I was, wrongfully arrested in my own home and raided. Fortunate for me, I was a federal government employee working in the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, holding a top secret clearance. So it's still strange, right? That if it could happen to me, right? If it could happen to me, I fear for your children, and there are many people that I found this is happening to, right? They're vulnerable, right? America's a generous nation. There, as much as there are people who are evil, there are also many good people who counter that. I was fortunate that God let me be exposed and placed me in the path of the good up until the time I became an American citizen. And all of this, maybe God wanted this to happen for me to be able to see another side of America and see what the vulnerable. It let me see what God had protected me for in the past over 20 years that I had never seen, right? And because one, I actually have the tools to address it. I'm a lawyer, right? I'm trained as a lawyer. I wasn't working. I was working for the federal government, using my skills in support of the federal government, in support of the war fighter. But I'm trained to be able to fight for the vulnerable. I'm not licensed, so now I can see what I can use my legal skills, get licensed to do that, right? This isn't legal advice. I have to always put that disclaimer. But my point in doing this video is to encourage Nigerians that, hope is not lost. Focus on building your schools, because one, the price tag of an American education is inflated. It's inflated. It's because everybody wants it. America pulls people from all over the world, right? Yes, there are many Nigerians who come from indigent homes and who won green cards, who didn't have much, and they succeeded here in America. You see, it's not just a story about elites who came, or children of the elites who came. There are many of them, but there are also many, and I see them, and many people who come from indigent, well, middle class background, close to indigent, that their families, they pool their resources for someone, right? Hoping he can be an economic migrant. People who want green cards, and people pool resources and they become prosperous here in America. But those days are over, because America has even stopped, the lottery green card process for Nigerians. They stopped it a long time ago. And Nigerians were becoming a lot. Because when Nigerians come here, many of them, they'll bring their relatives and all that stuff, right? Only Jide Wariri never did that. And he's the one who wanted, he was so envious. His family was so envious. His family was blessed, but his family was so envious about the prosperity that America gave me, the success America gave me, right? The American government, he was so envious of it, right? Without considering that there's a being greater than America that dictated the level of my success. And so he's placed himself as an impediment, not realizing it was God, right, that helped me, right? And so Jide Wari, he and his family, if they can fight God, I don't know, let us see. But that's neither here nor there. But that's another thing Nigerians who send their awards here have to contend with. you have to contend with the envy of family, because people you thought were family in Nigeria, when you send your children abroad, you'll see the things your so-called relatives will do to them. That crabs in the barrel that they say Black Americans have, it applies to Nigerians as well. I guess it's like the you know Nigerian crabs. They become the Nigerian crabs in an American basket, right? I remember I had a classmate in law school, and she was talking in class. She said it in class, a Yoruba, and she talked about what her. This was before my experience, and I thought, how can somebody's family do this? And I thought she was exaggerating until I experienced it. She was talking about the terrible things her uncles did to her, that she became homeless, that they made her homeless. I thought she was exaggerating. You will see the evil that your family has. I don't know what America does to them, because we're not like that back home, right? We don't have safety nets like Social Security. So it's family that helps you back home. My father didn't spend his wealth. He was a blessed man who became a bank CEO and bank chairman, a significant man, but he didn't spend his wealth on his children. He didn't spoil us because he spent his money on his village. So my father is heavily respected in the village we come from, because it wasn't just his brothers, there are people who weren't even related to me that grew up in my home that my father was sending to school, right? So many different people. My father raised his brothers, his junior brothers, his brothers' children, his older brothers' children, right? And they're successful. They're all successful. And I don't, that was my father's destiny, right? So, but that generosity, that family togetherness that we have in Nigeria, that your family, your extended family is your safety net, that doesn't happen in America. America is a nuclear family. Even that nuclear family, when you're 18, everybody, you find your way. It's a very individualistic society. So don't put your children in harm's way, and focus on developing those institutions, universities in Nigeria, right? Develop you now kids have the opportunity to develop through the internet. It's a reason I'm doing these videos as well. You can learn about America from videos I'm doing. I talk about American history. That's many years of education. That's education from Oxford University, from Bocconi University in Italy, from George Washington University Law School, from Columbia University, from Troy University, even from Nigerian University, University of Jos. I'm putting all of that together. Apart from the training from Bank of America, Wachovia Securities, we had a university. They sent me there from the department. Well, I can't tell you about what I learned in the Department of Defense. The university they sent me. We have a defense acquisition university. I was sent there as well to get more training and more certifications, more courses. So that's a lot of learning, and I'm sharing it. I'm not sharing DoD information. This has nothing to do with I don't share classified information, right? But I talk about U.S. history that's available. Um, it's available in the public domain, and I talk about United States presidents. I can discuss, do legal education, not legal advice, just general. And this video is about studying abroad. That pathway has been blocked in to Nigerians to come to America temporarily. Another uh, president can change policy, but America goes back and forth with respect to immigration. Uh, there was a president who did worse than what President Trump is doing now. It was Herbert Hoover, right? During the Great Depression, it was what was called the Mexican repatriation, when they would just round up American born Mexicans, round them up and remove them, file false charges, make life unbearable for them, and force them. The towns, counties, was the federal government that, coerced, induced the state and local government officials to do it, induce them, file false charges against them, buy one-way tickets for them to Mexico. People who were born in America, right? Mexican Americans born in America, and they'll just tell them that, okay, if you move to Mexico, you know, you don't have to face these false charges they filed against you. It was called the Mexican repatriation. About as many as 300,000 Mexican Americans were uh, They're unlawfully deported, right? Wrongfully deported during the Great Depression era, right? Under President Herbert Hoover, 300,000, right? So now we're seeing that's sort of what's going on in America as well. So keep your kids. Nigeria has tremendous resources. Many of us Nigerians here, when we look to Nigeria. So when people are just flooding here, it's not that I don't want Nigerians to enjoy the benefits I enjoyed, right? Look, many of my classmates, when you say benefits I'm enjoying, many of my classmates that I left behind are doing tremendously well in Nigeria. I have a classmate who's a general in the Nigerian army. I have classmates who are bank CEOs, right? Went to King's College, maybe they're bank CEOs in Nigeria, and they're there, right? So my father didn't have to come to America to become a bank chairman and bank CEO, to become a millionaire, to build mansions, to send his children, use his money to send his children to go and study in Europe, study in America, right? He didn't have to make money here in America. And there are many people, many people in Nigeria similarly as well. You can find success anywhere, right? And it's better to do it in your home, right? In your home, because you don't have to worry about your safety, your security. If you're worrying about your safety and your security, then you don't have the opportunity to be able to use your mind creatively, right? It takes away time from your productivity. In America, America is my own home, right? Because I've been able to do things because in the past I didn't have to worry about my safety, my security. But things have changed, right? They've now created conditions in which foreign students, immigrants have to now worry about their security and their safety. Let me stop this video here and I'll continue later on. My name is Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.